Welcome to Stage Dive, a podcast where we go deep on the art of live performance to help artists perform better on stage. I am your host, Jack Dawkins. I am a rapper, poet, and storyteller out of Boulder, Colorado. My guest for today is Oscar Collazos. He has been a stand-up comedian in New York City for nearly 20 years and has spent hundreds, if not thousands, of hours on stage. And in our conversation, we get into how do you deal with difficult crowds, how do you deal with your own emotional turmoil as a performer, and even some things you can do when you're just getting started so that you can start to build a little bit of momentum throughout your career. Oscar is the driving force behind hilarious Colombians, which is both an act and a tour that he has taken all over the country. It was in 24 cities last year. It's also an amazing show. I went when he came to Denver. I had so much fun chatting with him, and I know you'll enjoy this. So here is my conversation with Oscar. Modern marvels of technology. Always interesting. Cheers.
Cheers.
It's 2:20 in the afternoon for Oscar, in case anyone was worried that we were recording this late at night. We are not. He's just living his best life over there. What was the best day of the Hilarious Colombians national tour that you did? What was the best day?
Oh, that's a great question. There's a couple of things come to mind. I guess one of the best days was after our San Francisco show. We performed at Cobb's Comedy Club, a legendary venue in the stand-up comedy world. And afterwards, we had like 3 days until our next show. And I had booked the entire weekend in San Francisco. So I was able to actually go out after the show and drink and let loose. And realistically, I'd say maybe 1/8 of our audience. We had about 100 people at the show, but I would say more than 1/8, really. Probably about 20 people from the audience decided to go to this bar, and they told us this is the place to go, so we all went. So we were able to share a really good time with some of the people that went. Just hanging out with locals and finally being able to be like, all right, I don't have to really work tomorrow. We don't have to drive anywhere. We don't have to get to an airport. I was able to just honestly just get drunk. I hadn't gotten drunk the entire tour. I hadn't gotten drunk, and that night I got drunk. Got real drunk.
With a bunch of new friends.
With a bunch of new friends, yeah. So that was awesome. That was a really good night. Another really good night was in Fairfield, Connecticut. We performed at this place called Fairfield Comedy Club. And Fairfield isn't a big city. It's not. It's between New York City and Hartford, which would be the next big city up, I guess. And it's this little tiny club that is actually inside of a hotel in Fairfield, and they use where people have breakfast. They use that space. They turn it into a comedy club on the weekends. And we had about 100 people there. That was packed out because that's all it could take. Cobb's is like a 300-seat theater, but we still had 100, and it still felt nice.
Yeah.
But at Fairfield, you couldn't move. You could not move. It was so packed that it was hot. And I wasn't expecting that show to A, be sold out, and B, have so much fanfare. And man, what an amazing audience. Probably the best audience in all of the 24-city tour. This crowd was hot from start to finish. We could have sneezed on the mic and they would have laughed. I mean, they were eating it up. That was another great night.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
and
man.
You already half answered this question of like you didn't expect that, but like you did go to 24 cities. Like, do you feel like you started to see or notice any patterns about reading the room, understanding what the crowd was into, or was it really like every night was like, who fucking knows?
I would say it was maybe 50-50. There were some shows that was really Colombian, and you could tell those shows were really primed to be a great evening. Fairfield Comedy Club was pretty much all Colombians, all Colombian-Americans. But then we went to Dallas, and Dallas was a little tougher of a room. Beautiful setup. It was actually in Plano, just north of Dallas. Beautiful setup, almost like a brand new club, but there was a lot more Americans in the audience. And when Americans come to our show, I always want to know how they got there. Sometimes an American will marry into a Colombian. Sometimes it's a group that their Colombian friends are going out and they invite them. In Plano, there was a table of 11. You know, how do I describe them? Like the white dudes that wear loafers and hang out on a yacht.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
vineyard vines. You know,
Yeah.
they got pink salmon shorts on. Those dudes. There was a table of 11 of them in our Plano show, and I just did not understand how they got there. They had no real affiliation. And there was one guy whose name was, just take a wild guess what this guy's name was.
Was it like Trip?
Like it was Kent. His name was Kent. And Kent sat in the front row like this. The entire show. So that was really interesting. But yeah, I guess to answer the question, some crowds were really Colombian, and those were the ones that are like, we're really excited about this. Some were kind of mixed, and the excitement kind of dissipates a little bit in there because you have a table filled with Kents like this, who stayed like this, by the way, for pretty much the entire show.
And I imagine you've been dealing with shit like that your whole career, because like you've been doing stand-up in New York for how long?
I've been in New York 17, going on 18 years, I believe. I moved there like 2005.
Okay. Yeah. So it's been a minute.
Yeah, it's definitely been a minute.
Well, and like I was thinking about this, like how many hours do you think you've spent on stage?
That's a great question, and I've thought about this myself. I honestly have no clue. I couldn't even begin to have a clue, because at the beginning, and even still now, you do a lot of short sets, you know. So you're doing 5 minutes, you're doing 7 minutes, and there's a lot of those. There's a lot of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-minute spots that you get. In New York, you usually get a 10 to 12, maybe 15-minute spot. The longer spots are a little bit harder to come about. In Alaska, I did an hour and a half. So it's hard for me to even think about how many shows I've done and how many of those have been 5, 7, 10 minutes. You know, tonight I'm doing 40 minutes. So I've given this some thought before, and I honestly don't have a clue, and I would probably lose some brain cells trying to put a number together.
It's like, yeah, you could be sitting with the pad and paper for a long time.
Yeah, it would look like that iconic picture of like a statistic teacher in a college with just the entire chalkboard written out. You know, that's kind of what it would look like if I took every single show and wrote out 5 plus 5 plus 7 plus, 90 plus 40, that type of thing.
Yeah. Well, I have a lot of questions about this. So you've performed as short as 3, 4, 5 minutes. You've gone as long as 90. Like, for you as a performer, do you have a sweet spot? Do you have like an amount of time you really love being on stage within that huge range?
Yes. I honestly, and this is honestly just been happening lately, but I've gotten myself into that category where I get to headline a lot, and 45 minutes is a good sweet spot. And because I'm a storytelling comedian, so it's a story after story after story, and some of those stories can take a little bit longer to develop. So in a good 45-minute set, there's multiple stories that can happen. When you do a 2-minute audition, when you do a 3-minute audition, when you do a 5-minute spot, you have to truncate. Is that the word? Those stories, you have to shorten them up, and you lose a lot of the elements that make the story special. I always consider it like a meal. If Thanksgiving, you have this meal with turkey and stuffing and potato salad and mashed potatoes and whatever else. Like, what, I don't know. We've gone as far as having rice pudding on that plate because we're immigrants. But so yeah.
Don't tell them.
So for Thanksgiving, you have this huge plate of just everything. And that's my 90-minute set in Alaska. So you trim that down to more of your standard meal. That's my headlining 45-minute set. And then that 2-minute audition is like you buy a muffin, and you put that on the plate. I don't know where this analogy is going. I thought it was, a good analogy at first, and now it's turning into a horrible analogy. But it's basically a plate, and the longer you do, it's the more, fulfilling meal. Where someone's like, hey, go up there and do 3 minutes. I'm like, what the hell? I can't. What am I going to do in 3 minutes? But and Jack, that a 3-minute or 5-minute performance for somebody just getting up can seem like an absolute eternity.
Yes.
It's the longest 3 to 5 minutes you can ever imagine. But once you start, doing shows a lot, 3 minutes is like, what the hell am I going to do in 3 minutes?
Right.
So
yeah,
that's that.
No, I love the analogy because you wouldn't want to do Thanksgiving every day. So that hour and a half show, that full stage presence, I'm telling stories, I'm doing crowd work, you're pulling in all these things, and it's awesome. And I'm sure the people there had a great time. I feel like if you tried to do that 4, 5, 6 nights a week,
it'd be exhausting.
You'd be toast.
Yeah.
Same thing if you're just living on fucking muffins. At some point, you're like, Jesus Christ, can I some scrambled eggs or a cup of coffee, or can we get a little more going here? So I totally get it. But I was talking to someone the other day, and the piece they were saying, when you're just starting out, I think you feel an enormous responsibility, which is why those 3 minutes feel so long. You're like, I have to be amazing and hilarious from the second I step on stage to the second I get off. And I think what you learn over time is that the room is reacting to your energy. And so if you go up there frenetic of oh my God, I got to be funny right now, or I got to wrap my fucking face off from the second I get up there, it's they're just reading your anxiety, and everyone's like, ugh. But when you go up there and you establish rapport, it does take time. And I feel like that to me feels like one of the first big pieces of maturation as an artist, when you realize they're reading your energy. So if you're panicked, if you're trying too hard, if you're needy, if you're desperate, the whole room can feel it, and you would be better off taking an extra 30 seconds, getting set up, getting comfortable, and then getting ready to kind of connect with them.
Absolutely. I would go, I'm going to add to that. You have to go through that hundreds of times to be able to find out where you are really comfortable in that awkward beginning, in that awkward first 5 minutes. Last week, I did a spot at the Miami Improv. I'm currently in Miami at my parents' house, therefore the beautiful background.
That is not a Zoom background, folks. That is fucking real.
This is my mom's best 1984 purchase, and she still pledges it with the spray bottle and wipes it down, and I'm like, get rid of this thing. Anyways, so I did a show at the Miami Improv last week, and it was a they call it the turkey contest or something. So they have a slew of open micers go up and do 5 minutes, and the winner gets a turkey for Thanksgiving and $100. So I show up, and the guy that runs it knows me. He's like, hey, you want to close out the show? And I'm like, yeah, sure. You always want someone. You don't want 19 open micers to just be the show. You always want someone at the end to kind of bring up the energy before the people go home. Or if multiple seasoned veterans come in, you kind of sprinkle them throughout. So the show, the open micers are here, then the pros will bring it up. The open micer brings it back down. And at least the audience has a few good comics. And it was such a rough thing to see. It was, I feel bad because I feel like I'm talking trash about these guys, but I'm not. I'm just being honest. All but one were not good. And there was like 19 of them. There was literally like 19, 5 long, horrible minutes from young college boys and young, sexy girls that are getting into stand-up to there was like this 80-year-old that went up there, and he's kind of a well-known, popular old open micer, and he's got like one-liners. He almost, his act is like very Rodney Dangerfield-ish, which doesn't really connect with today's audience.
Yeah.
So all this to say, I'm watching this show, and the more the show goes on, the more anxiety I'm getting about how this audience is going to react to me. There's a group of like 60 frat boys that were there to see one of their, pledge guys go up. He tanked so hard, by the way. His own group booed him at the end. That's how bad it was.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was just so rough. And the MC is super nice. Still learning how to command the crowd. Didn't necessarily grab reins of the audience, because he doesn't get this opportunity that often. So he's treating it like a spot. So he just goes right into crowd work. And comedy's like sex, you just don't go right into the humping. The girl does. We can. A guy could go right into the humping, no problem. A girl wants to be kissed. She wants to be touched in the back of the neck. Maybe have a glass of wine, a little bit of kissing, and all that stuff is the beginning of a comedy show where you're like, hey, everyone, how's it going? Anybody celebrating anything? Who came from the furthest place? Who are you here to support? That type of, it was none of that. It was just right to jokes. And then it was just horrible sex for 19 times 5 minutes.
Jesus.
And I'm getting some major anxiety. I'm like, I almost told the producer, I was like, what if I don't go up? I don't want to go up. I don't want to go up. But I've already committed to it. I can't just be like, I'm piecing out here. So the MC, the reason I brought up the MC is because after the last comic, the MC is like, all right, well, that concludes our show. And when he said that, the 60 frat kids got up and started to walk out. But he was like, that concludes our show. Guys start walking up. They start leaving. And he's like, but we have one more comic that's going to do some time while we tally up the votes. So now he's saying this to a room that's definitely unhinged and not paying attention. And he brings me up. So I'm walking on stage as 60 frat kids are walking out of the showroom.
Oh, my God.
And I just remember that, they had music for me to walk up to. And then the DJ brought down the music as they were still filing out. And I was like, no. Put the music up. Bring back the music. And in my mind, I was like, keep playing the music until they're completely gone.
Yeah.
Right. And so I brought back the music. They eventually were all like, most of them were at the door. And then I brought down the music, and it was so awkward. The remaining 40, 45 people in the audience were now one table over here and this entire section. So there's this big gap missing right here. And the only thing that I could say, that I'd paid attention to the entire show to make sure no one said this, but I was like, I am so happy that all these rapists left.
Oh, no.
I was thinking of, I know it was horrible, but it made everyone laugh. And that's why we're in this business. But who was the kid? There was a kid, the swimmer kid who got in trouble. I think he was in Stanford.
God. Is it Brock Turner? I think is his name. I know who
I
you're
think
talking
so.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wanted to use his name, but I was like, that's too obscure of a reference because I just asked you and we had to think about it. So
Right.
I was like, oh, what if I was like, oh, these Brock Turners just left? Then people would be like, who's
Who the
Brock
fuck is
Turner?
that? Yeah.
Yeah. But so I just was like, man, just go with the word. Some people don't like it, but whatever. I was like, I'm so happy that all the rapists left. And that was able to kind of break that tension of being awkward, which was the original uh, thing that how you introduced this topic. It's really awkward. And if you're not trained and if you haven't gone through it a lot, I would have been just as awkward. You can't just get up there and start telling jokes while the people are filing out. You can't just go up there and start telling normal jokes, not in my opinion, after more than half the room just left. So I let it kind of marinate. I kind of let everybody, you know, sulk in it for a little bit. And I let them also know, like, if this is awkward for you, this is way more awkward for me. So yeah, you definitely have to command the stage upon getting on it, and it takes so long to figure out who you are and how you can handle that. I'm at the point where I honestly don't give a fuck. I don't care. I don't care if the people are gonna laugh or not, because I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do, and I would like to say it's proven that it makes people laugh, because it's not scientific. There are times I go up there and I bomb, but when you bomb, that becomes entertainment for me. So that's why I don't care.
Right.
That's why I don't care, because if I make you laugh, great. That's why I came here for. If I don't make you laugh, then guess what? Then your awkward faces are entertaining me. That's kind of how I see it. But it took so long to get there. You know what I mean?
Well, that's like, so that was my next question, because you mentioned like you're stepping into this part of your career where you're headlining a lot more. And like, so we've known each other since 2010, 2011, something in there.
Mm-hmm.
So like,
Mm-hmm.
I certainly wasn't there for the early years, but I've watched you go through a lot of paces, have good nights, bad nights. I think there was a point where on Facebook, like once a month, there would be an Oscar post about like, I fucking quit this business. I hate my life. I
Hey,
never want to do this again.
I almost put one up today.
It's like,
I swear to God.
the journey continues, but
Yeah.
it's really beautiful to hear both, that like you're getting more of the spots and the opportunities that you wanted. And it's the question I guess I'm asking is like, do you feel like that letting go of that surrender of like, good nights and bad nights are not even in my control necessarily, and it's just my job to keep showing up? Like, what do you think helped you start to get more of those spots you were really craving?
I have one particular instance, story, a date. I wish I remember the date, but I got an audition to become a regular at Dangerfield's Comedy Club in New York's Upper East Side. Legendary venue. Unfortunately, the pandemic closed it down. So this is right before the pandemic. I get a phone call, and they were like, all right, you're going to go audition for, I forget the guy's name. I forget the owner's name. But everyone knew him. Like, everybody knew who he was. And they were like, he's gonna watch you, and then he'll let us know if he passes you or not. So I'm like, okay, great. I'm very excited. Because whenever you're called to a comedy club to be passed,
Right.
it's like, oh, that's what we work for. We work for this validity from people, but also more importantly from the validity of the booker and the owners. So then we can be at that club a lot to then get more validity from the people that go to that club. So I can't believe I can't remember his name at the moment, but I will say that I don't remember his name because it was, my time there was so short lived, because once I got past, the pandemic happened like 2-3 months later, and then I just never went back. So I auditioned for this dude one time, and that was it. So I'm thinking about my 5-minute set, thinking, all right, what stories can you shorten up? What short jokes can you do in 5 minutes? And then I show up, and this was like a Wednesday. And if anybody's watching this and has been to Dangerfields, if it wasn't a Friday or Saturday, you're performing in front of 4 people. So I show up and there's 4 people. And the guy's like, all right, so you're gonna go on at the end after Aaron Berg. If you don't know who Aaron Berg is, he is one of the funniest, most in your face, most does not give a flying fuck if he offends you or not. He's actually on a tour called Offend Everyone Tour. Um, and he just goes from right to left and makes fun of everybody with zero filter. And he is a machine gun of jokes, just nonstop. He says the craziest things that everybody laughs at. Some people cringe. Um, so when he showed me that I was usually a 5 minute guest spot is nestled in the middle,
Right.
and that's what I was thinking. I'm gonna go, and they're gonna put me in the middle somewhere, and that's actually kind of a comfortable spot because you're in between like 2 pillows. It's like a good headliner, a 5 minute audition, and another good headliner, and the show continues. But when I saw that I was at the end, these people have already endured an hour and a half show, and Aaron Berg was up for 25 minutes, just nonstop, destroying the 4, 5, at most 6 people in that audience. And he murdered so hard. And I was like,
Oh my
I was
God.
just sitting there going, I cannot believe that I have to go up for 6 people after Aaron Berg. Everyone was funny and they were tired from laughter, and now they're spent from more laughter, and I got to get up and entertain these people in front of the owner that's supposed to pass me. So at that point I was like, I don't care what happens here. If I get passed, great. If I don't get passed, I don't, who cares? I haven't been at this comedy club, and I'm going to continue not being at this comedy club. That's it. It's that simple. I'm also stressed out and like, sweating bullets for one guy's approval in one of the hardest performances I've ever had to go on stage for, which is 6 people after Aaron Berg. I was like, why are you stressing yourself out? All of this sucks. All of this sucks. So just go up there and don't give a fuck, because you don't give a fuck about that guy. You don't give a fuck about the 6 people. I would say I don't give a fuck about Aaron Berg, but I do. He's awesome. He's so funny. But I will say he just performed, and I don't give a fuck about his performance. Like, I just got to a point where I was like, well, I don't care, whatever happens. And I went up there, and right before he goes, you're gonna do 5 minutes, and we'll light you at 5 minutes. But if he likes you, he'll let you keep going, and then just look for the light. So 5 minutes goes by. I see no light. I ended up doing 15 minutes at the end, and had people laughing. But I was still kind of in my own little head, and then I left, and the guy was gone. I forget. I can't remember. I can't remember this guy's name. But by the time I got off, he was gone. He wasn't in the corner anymore. Old little man. He was gone. He went down to his fucking lair, and yeah, I mean, he looked like a hobbit. And then I got the email, and it was like, hey, he loved you, and he passed you, and we're gonna give you some dates at Dangerfields. And I was like, oh my God. I wrote that off. I was like, I went in there not giving a fuck. This is not gonna happen. I want to say I did my best. I just did who I was, and it worked. And I was like, you should go into a lot of more of these shows with the I don't care mentality. So that was the springboard to kind of going into shows. I care. Don't get me wrong. I care. You care
couldn't
deeply.
do it if you didn't.
Yeah, exactly. But I also don't care enough to have it ruin my day anymore. I'm like, if I make people laugh, great. If I don't make people laugh, whatever.
Yeah. I would also guess like there's, and again, I think this is by necessity. At some point, you learn to like separate criticism of your performance or of a night or of a context from criticism of self. Because I think when you're just starting, like it's all that like I am bad, I suck, I'm not talented, I'm not funny, I don't rap well. Take your pick, right? Like we all have that phrase. When you do it long enough and you've had the benefit of having good shows, great shows, bad shows, disaster shows, you realize like it's not actually about me. It's that there's a lot of variables that I can't control, Sometimes they conspire in a good direction, danger fields. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes you just get a shit hand and like can't do anything about that.
Yeah, there was one time I performed at New York Comedy Club, and I was there Friday and Saturday. And on Friday, I did very well. And on Saturday, I did the same set of jokes. And I tanked. And I remember that was one of the moments where I went home kind of scratching my head going, what? What was it me? Was it the audience? And I remember thinking, well, it wasn't you because you did the same jokes on Friday and they worked. So it must have been the audience. You know, you never want to blame the audience, but sometimes an audience can suck. But I remember that specific experience being like, man, just go up and do what you do, and if they laugh, they laugh, and if they don't, they don't. I was actually more caught up on the Saturday's non-laughter than celebrating the Friday laughter. And I was like, you need to celebrate Friday's laughter and overlook the Saturday's non-laughter, you know? Yeah. So I've also made that switch. It's like, you know, very early in my career, I'd be on stage and people would be laughing, but I would have a guy like Kent just in the front row, or a lady just, you know, just mean mugging me. And I would focus all my attention on Kent or the mean lady mean mugging me. And then at some point I realized, wow, I had all these people. It took a while to get there too. It took a lot of these type of experiences, but I had a bunch of people that I was making laugh. I had a bunch of people that I was entertaining, and I let one sourpuss capture my attention, and it was my goal to make that person laugh. So I put all my energy into Kent, and I abandoned the rest of the people that were on board for me. And then I wasn't able to get back in because now I had this angry, sour mood, which is that's not how I started. So now the audience is like, whoa, that's good. Now he's different. And I went through that a lot. So now if someone's mean mugging me, man, I just look right over them. I'm like, I'm not paying attention to them at all, you know?
Yeah.
So
I think it's great advice. I had a similar experience where I went to a show and one of the openers was a local artist, and he had a great set. Like, his name's Resurface. He's from Denver. You should look him up. He's a great artist. And I remember asking him how the set went. And he told me, like, there was this one woman in the front row who had clearly come for the headliner and just wanted nothing to do with me. And she just stared at me the whole time. And as like someone who was in the crowd and couldn't see her, I was like, but did you see like the other 400 people that were like jumping around and losing their fucking mind? Because like everyone else had an amazing time. And it's like, it's human to notice when someone is like showing obvious disdain. But at some point you also realize like there's no winning there.
No.
Maybe you could win them over, maybe, but you would waste your entire set, your entire performance trying to convince one person to love you when they're literally standing in a sea of people who love you so much.
Yeah. It's funny you bring that up because we had a similar experience in the last show of the tour, which happened to be in Washington, D.C. This great little venue called the Comedy Loft. We have a guy named Antonio on our tour. Antonio is a very popular Colombian comedian. He's been famous in Colombia for many years, decades.
And like mega famous, right? Like this is not like casually known. Like if he's walking around Medellin, people are like, I know who that guy is.
We walked around Times Square for a photo shoot, and he must have been stopped 30, 40 times for pictures. And I was like, who? I was like, wow, I guess I didn't know he was that famous, but any Colombian that was walking around on vacation in Times Square that day recognized him and stopped and asked for a picture. So he's mega famous and he's part of our tour. He does the least amount of time because he's just learning how to do it in English, right? So he even told me, he's like, man, I can only give you 5-10 minutes in English. And I'm like, that works, because we're helping him develop that English content, and in turn he's helping us get people in the door. And this is exactly where the story was going. In DC, I'm the producer. I start the show, and then I kind of sit back and I kind of watch how everything happens. and I noticed that these ladies came in super late. Two ladies came in super late. They sat in the back. Um, they watched, and Antonio happened to come out pretty much as they got there. And then once Antonio was done, they left. And that made me so angry. And I was like, oh man, because, you know, if I don't know how to say this, but this is my product, this is my family, and Antonio is a big part of the family. But I also want these ladies to A, come on time, and B, get to know the rest of the members of my family because they are just as funny, and just as awesome. And a lot of times you go to, this happens so often where you go to see someone that you paid money for, XYZ famous person, and then you leave the show going, man, their openers were hilarious. XYZ person was great. They're always great, but the openers were amazing. And that's because there's zero expectations of the openers. But these ladies came in and didn't even give us a chance. And that's what made me mad. I was like, man, why don't I want you to come and I want you to watch my show. I want you to watch Alex's show. I want you to watch Vanessa's show. I want you to watch everybody's show so you could fall in love with all of us. Because right now you just came to see Antonio and then you left. And so that still kind of happens. And I had to be like, man, you got to let that go because there's that happens in every city. And honestly, it's their loss, whatever.
Yeah.
But you still go through it.
And I'm sure there's a version forever.
Yeah.
Some version of that.
Unless you're mega famous. Could you imagine Drake just jamming out in a theater and then someone is just like this the whole time in the front row? Right. I can't envision that.
Yeah, that's fair. There's some threshold you can get above.
Yeah.
So I know that this question could probably be an entire episode, but what do people get wrong about or misunderstand about stand-up comedy? Because I feel like it's interesting for you because you were in restaurants as like chef and you worked for David Chang. So like you were in the eye of the storm of like chef as mega rock star. And now like comedians, similar trajectory, have gotten so much more fame and notoriety, and Netflix has given access to so many more people, obviously. But what that brings is like in restaurants, Yelpers, like people who perceive that they are experts. I say this lovingly, you are not. So what do people misconceive about stand-up? What do people not really understand?
One of the things that comes to mind is I think people forget that it's an act. It could be an act. It could definitely be an act. We put on a persona. We say, stupid things. A punchline to one of my jokes is build the wall. I set all this up, and at the end, the punchline is build the wall. And it's a great, funny punchline. It's a misdirection because people don't know that that's what I'm going to say. But then people get mad because they're like, I can't believe you actually want a wall built. And it's like, I don't want the wall built.
I do not.
I don't. I'm an immigrant. Why would I want the wall built? So people forget that. They take these lines and they hang on to them like they're the truth, and they're a lot of times they're not. And that's the tough part, specifically now, where everything's recorded and people, they're like, he said this, and then all of this fake universe that's out there just chimes in, and they want to bring you down for something that's not even, it's not even really real. One of the reasons why I don't put a lot of my content online. Some comics just spend all day chopping up their clips and they put everything out. But I don't have the attention span for that. But I also don't want one little stupid line to get all this, heat for no reason. So I'm like, I'm going to spare myself that. And, but then I ask myself, how come I can't get people at my shows? And that's because I'm not out there, putting stupid stuff online. So I'm actually shooting myself in the foot, but I'm happy. That's one thing, people misconstrue it. sometimes people think sometimes people think our life is amazing, and it's not. If you ask a lot of comedians, we're filled with angst, we're filled with worry, we're filled with anxiety, and they think that you live this life because you post that you're here and you post that you open for that person and you did this. But in between those, 1 minute reels, it's like, oh my God, I'm gonna kill myself.
Oh
So
my
it's a lot of
God.
that. People are like, you're living the life, and I'm like, yes, I'm living the life, but living the life also comes with other, problems that people don't realize.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I wanna talk a little bit more about the tour. And selfishly, like we got to have this conversation for 2 hours over breakfast, which was awesome. But
Yeah, it was
like,
great.
just so everyone listening understands, like that 24 city tour is you. That was not like through a booking manager. That was not through like a team. That was like Oscar with a credit card and a cell phone put together a 24 city tour with how many people were in the company?
6.
Yeah, so you coordinated travel, hotels, meals, performances, ads, crowd draw. Like filling a show in Denver where I live as one artist is already hard. You did it across 24 cities. Like what what did you eat that morning where you're like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna book a fucking 24 city tour and see how this goes. Like it's I'm so in awe. But like what what was the decision process like where you got over the hump of like, fuck it, I'm gonna do this? Because I imagine you don't book like 5 cities and then add 2 or add a couple. I think you set out to do like a whole tour, right?
Yeah, well, thank you. Those are very kind words. The tour before, we did 7. We did 6 cities in Florida. We did 2 outside of Florida, so for a total of like 8. This 8 city. The tour was actually only 6. The other 2 were kind of in the same time frame, but not tour wise all lumped together.
Yep.
But so I did 6 the year before, and I was like, okay, this can work. And the next time came around, the following year, and I was like, all right, well, if we did 6, let's do 12. Let's just double it and see what happens. And then I sent out some emails, and I was like, why are you limiting yourself at 12? Send out every email to every single comedy club at every single city, mainly because most of them aren't going to respond. So I was like, if I send out 12 emails, I'm going to get 7 emails back. And those 7 emails are from the 6 cities that we already did, and maybe another one that's going to have interest. So I was like, you got to cast a wider net. And this is a hard business, and you never know where you're going to be in a year. So you might as well try to put all the chips on the table right now. And so I sent out a shit ton of emails. I was like, I'm just going to do it, and not thinking anybody was going to respond. And people responded, and I eventually got 23 responses. And I was like, okay, well, then I guess we're just going to do these 23 cities. I don't know how we're going to do them, but we're going to do them. Um, it's kind of like when I moved to New York. I'm like, I'm going to move to New York. I don't have a job. I don't have money. I don't know anyone, but I'm just going to go and figure it out. And you throw yourself into a fire. I'm really good at throwing myself into fires. I'm also really good at starting fires at homes. So if
That's
anyone
another true
needs,
story for another time.
yeah, if anyone needs a house burned up, just let me know. I'm really good at that. But I feel like I perform the best when I throw myself into the deep end with no floaties, and it's just like, man, you sink or swim. So I put all I once I got all the 23 yeses, I remember immediately being overwhelmed. I was like, this is not what I expected. But this is awesome. And how are you going to do this? And I was like, well, you know what? We're just going to figure it out. And it was stressful going through it for sure. But once it was all said and done, it was quite honestly maybe the second most amazing experience of my life next to going to college.
Mm.
You know, it was just so it was so awesome. I didn't profit, but I also didn't lose too much. But I would do it all over again because it was amazing. So I just man, you set out to conquer it all, and whatever you can conquer, whatever comes back, that's what I did.
Mm.
So
When you send those emails, like
I
I'm
don't know. I don't know
curious.
if I answered the question. I think
No,
I did.
you 100% did.
Okay.
Like, because if I'll reflect back just to make sure I heard. So you did a smaller tour. It was 6 cities in Florida, which again, like, great controlled experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't even know if you took flights, but like we can drive it all. Like, again, well, particularly like, so the theme of the tour is that you're all Colombian, and obviously Florida is going to have a high index of people who at least speak Spanish if are not from a Spanish speaking place. So like,
Right.
thumbs up. And then you're like, okay, so doubling it, which even like if you say it out loud, like doubling anything is a fucking lot. Like if you had a plate of dinner and then you had a second plate of dinner, you'd be like, fuck, that's a lot of food.
Yes.
But you appreciated, like, because the universe is unpredictable and you don't know how many emails you're going to get back, like swing for the fences and see what happens. And I like you got a better response than you were expecting, which is why I'm curious, like when you were emailing, what were you sharing? You know, like how do you present yourself and the show to, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but to get the bookers' attention, because I'm sure they get shit like that
The
all the
pitch.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, the pitch. Um, a comedy club is a business, and I think a common mistake in a young stand-up comedian's life is, they're like, I'm funny, you should book me. And the comedy club business doesn't operate solely on funniness. That sounds like it, that doesn't sound right because it does. But just because you're funny doesn't mean that you're going to sell tickets. And if you don't sell tickets, and the place isn't making revenue, you could be the funniest person on earth, but if no one knows who you are, you're not going to be able to put people in the seats, and they're not going to make money. So that's just unfortunately how the business is. So when I email these clubs, it's a business like approach. You know, it's my introduction. My name's Oscar. This is what I do. This is what I've been doing for a while, and this is the project that I have. And we target areas with high populations of Colombians, and your city's one of them. And I include a snapshot of Colombian demographics in the United States. So if I'm sending a pitch to Houston, Houston's the 7th biggest city for Colombians. And I'm like, this is where we're gonna, these are the people that we're gonna advertise to. And the only thing that I can say is that they're gonna come out whenever. And sometimes this is the part that sometimes gets lost and people don't trust. Colombians are very supportive. They are very supportive of their culture. So if anyone is doing something Colombian, Colombians know. When the Boston Red Sox went to the World Series some years back, Edgar Renteria was the shortstop. Everyone in Colombia was cheering for the Red Sox because Edgar Renteria was the shortstop for the Red Sox. When this guy named Egan Bernal won the Tour de France like 3 or 4 years ago, he's Colombian. The entire country shut down. Everyone in every city was on the streets celebrating this guy. When Juan Pablo Montoya won the Indianapolis 500, Colombia went bananas. So people in Colombia keep their eye out on their own, and whenever something happens, they celebrate it. So that thought process, coupled with when a Colombian goes out, they just go to dance. And that's pretty much what they do. They go out, they dance. They go out, they dance. But comedy is very special. Comedy is something new in that Colombian mentality. So now I'm offering them something different to do than dancing. And also, we're Colombian, so this should be of your interest. And that all goes into the email. And, you know, just try to reach out to the local Colombian community. There's a bunch of Colombian Facebook groups. You go to restaurants, you try to find some influencer that's big in that area, and you just whatever approach you can get to get people to see it. That's what I'm writing in an email, and a lot of times, you know, with the American culture being very open to diversity, they're like, oh, this is definitely something that we can, you know, let's give it a shot. It helps even more when the person in charge of saying yes or no is Colombian, knows a Colombian, is married to a Colombian, which has happened before. You know, I sent an email to a guy in Texas and he's like, dude, I'm Colombian. This sounds great. Let's get the ball rolling on it. I didn't even have to send him a pitch. He was just like, this is right up my alley. So I just basically promised them that we're gonna not only provide a really good show, we're gonna get people in the door. And every year it's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. So hopefully they read it, and that's how I get the emails back.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, going back to Fairfield, when they offered me Fairfield, I almost didn't take it because I was like, there's no Colombians in Fairfield. They all live in New York. They all live somewhere else. And I was like, why would I take Fairfield? And I was like, you know what? It's on the table. Just take it. Who cares? Just take it. Not knowing that Colombians live in Fairfield too. It's just not a huge city. And so they go there. They all lived in New York City, but they eventually got away and bought bigger homes in Connecticut. And then the place was packed. And like I said, it was one of the best shows. And it was a show that I almost didn't take because I was like, why am I going to, you know, go there? There's no Colombians there.
Right.
So the pitch is a business pitch. You know,
Yes.
It's not, hey, we're funny. It's hey, we're going to bring you people.
Yeah.
And we're funny.
And we're also, we are funny.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really curious. Like, I can't remember if I asked you this when we got together in person. Like, how much of your material was about your heritage and your story and your family, kind of like before Hilarious Colombians kind of got started? Because now, again, I went to the show. It's fucking amazing. Like, so much of the content from everyone, but you in particular, was really about your experience of coming to the US, growing up, like being the cultural translator, I think is maybe not the exact term you use, but certainly something that I think will resonate. Like, how much has this experience like opened that up, or was that something that was always part of your show?
It's interesting you asked that because for a while before I was targeting my target audience, you know, I would have a normal set, non-Colombian content, and I would have a small portion of it of being Colombian, right? So I trying to make what we call a mainstream audience laugh. A mainstream audience in the comedy lingo is just like a majority white audience. If I go all Colombian on them, I'm going to lose them. So I had to develop all this other content that was easily digestible for them, and then I would sprinkle in a portion of the Colombian stuff. But I had a bunch of Colombian stuff that I could just never use. So once I decided to try to put this together, I was able to put all this stuff to work and then add this. So my content grew, the time grew. And throughout this process of doing the tour, I've learned how to, you know, take this entire Colombian content, chop it up, and put it into the American content to have, so I don't lose people with just an entire story about being an immigrant. All that's chopped up and kind of finally put into the other set that the mainstream audience could take in. So it's helped me I have two sets. I basically, in essence, have two sets. I can go and do a majority white audience, and I'll talk about the restaurant business, my travels, going to college, things that happen in New York, and I could leave out the immigrant stuff. But I also have this entire other hour of immigrant stories and things that I've gone through with my family. So it's definitely helped broaden the content, and I think it's done the same for the rest of the performers in the group, because now they get to experiment more with this part of our creativity. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you have to make everybody laugh. Bill Bellamy, a long time ago, told me, he's like, you got to make everybody laugh, man. It doesn't matter how old they are, what color they are. You have to be able to be universally funny. And that's something that I still carry to this day. And it's just taken me up until the last couple of years to be able to be like, oh, okay, I can perform in an all-black audience. I could perform in a senior citizen center. I could perform at a high school, although I don't want to. And I could perform at a college, although I don't want to. And I could perform in a multicultural place. I could perform for the most far left Democrats, and I could perform for the most conservative Republicans. And to be fair, some of the best audiences are the most conservative Republicans, because you can make fun of everything and they're on board with it. But if you make fun of stuff to the left, they get a little bit more upset about it.
So interesting.
It's so interesting. Whenever they're like, you're booked here, it's a majority older white Republican crowd. I'm like, I love it. I cannot wait to go there.
So interesting.
When they're like, this is a freshman class at a college, I'm like, where's the barf bag?
Yeah.
I'm not even kidding.
Oh my God. Well, so like what I was going to ask is like, so you mentioned the term like to mainstream audience. How, and you came to New York in, I think you said 2005. How has the quote unquote mainstream audience changed or evolved over that time?
That's a good question. They're getting younger, which can be flipped. And I could say they're getting, I'm getting older. I'm not quite sure, but I came to New York as like a 25, 26-year-old. Obviously that was a different time in terms of people being really sensitive about topics, and also having platforms in which they could voice their opinion. So you can kind of just say whatever. Now it's a little tougher to just be who you are, because someone's recording you, someone's going to put you on Twitter, someone's going to dig up your past. I always ask myself, how come I'm not famous? And I'm like, I know why. Because if I do get chosen to be famous, somebody's going to dig up a Facebook post and they are going to sink me. They're going to sink me. I get the memories all the time. 8 years ago, this was your post, and I'll read them and I'll be like, what the fuck? I got to erase that. I got to take that down.
Oh, no.
So I don't necessarily know how the audiences have changed, other than they've gotten younger and maybe a little bit more sensitive.
Yeah.
But also, now I'm a little bit more picky and choosy on where I perform and who I perform for.
Yeah.
So,
one last question, and then I do want to make sure everyone has a chance to hear like where they can find you. Curiosity I have, and actually, like I think in the restaurant industry is one of the only places this isn't true. If you show up at a restaurant and you say like I am available and I will work, you can get a job.
Immediately.
All right. Like no qualification, nope. Just show up, say yes. You're good.
They'll literally give you a Windex bottle and they're like, go wipe down table 2.
Yep. You're good to go.
Yep.
But like for basically everything else, like you got to have prior experience. You got to do yada, yada. And like, I think as a young performer myself, so it's like, what shows have you done? What venues have you played? How many people do you normally draw? And it's like fucking none. Cause like, I'm just starting. So when you talked about like this big open mic, like what are, if there are any, some simple things people can do to just start getting their foot in the door, to start going from like zero to something?
One of the best pieces of advice that I got from what I would like to call one of my mentors, his name's Al Romero, Cuban guy, been doing comedy his whole life. Super funny. When I moved to New York, he goes, get up everywhere. Wherever there's a microphone and you have the opportunity to make people laugh, get up everywhere. If Taco Bell is having an open mic, go to Taco Bell's open mic. That's exactly what he said. And I think that is a piece of advice that has helped me in my career a lot, because you can't be picky and choosy. I want to perform at the Comedy Cellar. That could happen, but you're just not going to get in at the. You need to experience great shows, shitty shows, mediocre shows, shows where you're not in your element, shows that rock your world a little bit. You need to do birthday parties. You need to be hired for bar mitzvahs. You need to go after a band. You need to go before a band. You need to go after a spoken word artist. You need to go before a spoken word artist. You need to do a college convention. You need to do, there's so many, there's just get up everywhere, because every single performance is a rep at the gym. And, we're all trying to get bigger and stronger. And just get up anywhere when you're starting out. Get up anywhere. It doesn't matter. And if you bomb, great. And if you do good, great. Also, be a little humble. If you do good, you probably didn't do that good. Yeah. You did okay, but just keep that humility and just keep finding out how you can get better. And the only way to get better is to get up every single place. If there's an open mic at noon, go to that open mic at noon. You also have to create your own opportunities. You can't just be like, where are the shows? How come I don't see any shows? If there's no shows, start a show, create a show. Then you're in charge, and then you can do whatever you want. So just get up everywhere. Just get up, keep getting up. Don't stop getting up. That's what I would tell people in any type of show business, really, is just keep getting those practice reps, because the more, I'm a big visual person, the more you visualize, the more you can see a small audience and visualize a bigger audience. When you actually are in the big audience, you've already seen it in your mind. So it's not going to startle you. I got that from a priest, believe it or not. I was a best man at a wedding. And, when we were going through the walkthrough, the priest goes, he looked at me and he goes, and you need to be ready to catch him in case he faints. And we all laughed like he was joking. He's like, I'm not joking. He goes, you'd be surprised how many grooms faint at the altar. And there's a reason why. It's because men don't think about marriage. Men never visualize marriage. Men never visualize themselves at the altar. Women have visualized themselves at the altar since they were little girls. So when they're actually at the altar mentally, they've practiced. Men have not. And that's when they faint. So the same thing can be said for entertainment. The more you get up, the more there's 4 people. They could be drunk. They could be throwing a drink at you. They could be enjoying your set. That audition for Dangerfields for 6 people after Aaron Berg, I was just like, you know what? Let me envision a bigger audience. Let me pretend this room was full, and I'm going to rock out to this like the room was full. And, when you get in front of a big crowd, it's like, oh, I've been here before. I've seen this before. So I'm not going to faint in front of. I did a really big crowd. The biggest crowd I ever did was like 1,400. It was like a 2-tiered level theater in Hartford, Connecticut. And when I walked out, I saw it, and I remember it kind of took my breath away. And even my buddy that was in the audience, he's like, caught you off guard, didn't it? And I was like, it definitely did.
Sure did.
He's like, I saw it. You were stunned for a little bit. Because at that point I had, I visualized big audiences, but not 2 tiers, Right.
Yeah.
But even that made me be like, all right, now you can visualize 2 tiers. You've lived 2 tiers, So just visualize and just get up and have fun with. You have to have fun with it. You can't do it and not have fun, because then you're just killing yourself internally.
Yeah. Amazing. Oscar, where can people find you?
People could find me on Instagram is probably the best. I am Colombian. I'm a comic, so I am Colombian comic, all put together. Colombian comic, all put together. ColombianComic. Colombian comic, all one word. COLO. Colombia, South America is spelled with O's. Columbia, South Carolina, and Columbia, the university, are spelled with U's. So Colombian Comics, COLO. That's where I post all my shows. If I have a funny clip that I want to put up, that's where I'll do it. And if you're watching this and you're like, oh, he's Colombian, whatever. Our show's for literally anybody. Our show is for anybody and everybody. We just happen to be Colombian, and I'm going to ride that wave because I'm proud of the culture and I'm proud of my friends. But the show is literally for anybody. So if you see Colombian comedy is that account, Colombian and then comedy, all put together on Instagram, one word. That's where we'll post all of our shows whenever I get this next tour up and running.
Amazing. Oscar, I appreciate you. Thanks for spending the time with me.
Yes, you can also find me under my mom's bed crying a lot.
Not in front of this beautiful armoire with chalices and all that good stuff.
Oh my God, option. Yeah. My mom catches my tears and she puts them in these glasses.
Oh my God. All right. Have a good set tonight, man.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Stage Dive, and I hope that you enjoyed it. New episodes drop each and every Wednesday. You can find highlights and clips of these conversations on TikTok and Instagram using the handle @StageDivePodcast. If you have any questions for us, want to be featured on the show, or have anything else to send, you can always email us at stagedivepodcast@gmail.com. This is Jack Dawkins, and no matter how you're performing in the world today, I want you to know that you